The council chamber had been designed by beings who believed silence was a political tool. The walls were grown, not built, translucent sheets of mineral organic crystal that slowly shifted color depending on the emotional average of the room. Right now, they were a very professional shade of neutral blue, which meant everyone present was pretending to be calm. Michael stood in his assigned position, hands folded behind his back, spine straight, face carefully adjusted into what the diplomatic training manual called attentive neutrality and what he personally called looking awake without promising anything. He had been standing there for 43 minutes, which was exactly long enough for his left foot to go numb and his right knee to start making quiet but threatening complaints. Queen Thera was speaking. She stood at the center dais, tall and composed, her long ears rising elegantly from silver-white hair that was bound in a style both ceremonial and aggressively impractical. From a distance, she could almost pass for human, same proportions, same expressions, but up close the differences became undeniable. Her eyes reflected light just a fraction too slowly, as if reality needed a moment to catch up with her thoughts. Her ears were not decorative. They moved subtly, reacting to tones below the range of human hearing, to truths not yet spoken. Michael did not look directly at them. He had learned early on that staring at an alien monarch's ears was considered impolite in at least 7 star systems and grounds for ritual apology in 3. She was outlining a trade corridor dispute involving mineral rights, hyperspace lane taxation, and something called a quantum courtesy buffer, which Michael suspected had been invented purely so diplomats could argue about it for decades. He was half listening, half running a private mental betting pool on how long the session would continue. His internal AI implant, officially deactivated but still very much alive in the way mold is alive, offered helpful commentary. Current odds favor another 40 minutes, it whispered in the back of his mind. You should consider blinking more. Your face is starting to look judgmental. He blinked. Once. Slowly. Queen Thera continued speaking, her voice smooth, resonant, layered with harmonic undertones that the translator struggled heroically to flatten into something approximating standard galactic common. The chamber hummed softly with environmental systems and restrained impatience. Then she stopped. Not paused. Stopped. The sound cut off so cleanly that it felt like someone had reached into the room and muted reality. The walls shifted color, not blue anymore, but an uncertain pale violet that suggested confusion was winning the vote. Michael noticed before he understood. His implant went quiet. The diplomats froze. A junior delegate on the far side of the chamber inhaled at exactly the wrong moment, and then seemed unsure whether exhaling would be legally binding. Thera was staring, not at the council, not at the data projections suspended in the air, at him, directly at him. Michael felt a familiar, deeply unwelcome sensation crawl up his spine. It was the same feeling he used to get just before things exploded, alarms sounded, or someone said his name over an open channel when they definitely should not have known it. He did not move. Training said stillness. Training always said stillness right up until it said run. Thera took a single step forward, her long ears angled slightly backward, a gesture that meant nothing good in any known cultural database. Her expression was not anger. It was not shock either. It was something far worse. Recognition struggling with disbelief. She leaned forward just enough that only those closest could hear her. Are you still alive? The words were quiet, almost gentle. They hit Michael like a gravitational anomaly. For half a second, his brain attempted several explanations in rapid succession. Translation error, metaphorical phrasing, alien idiom involving productivity or morale. Then all of those collapsed under the weight of one undeniable fact. She was looking at him like someone who had seen a ghost and realized it was breathing. Michael swallowed. His mouth was dry. He briefly considered answering with a joke. Something light, something deflecting. Define alive, maybe. Or it depends on the paperwork. Humor was usually his best weapon. This was not a situation that respected weapons. Around them, the council chamber remained frozen. Someone coughed. The sound echoed like a crime. Thera straightened slightly as if realizing where she was. Who was watching? Her face rearranged itself into royal composure with impressive speed, but her eyes never left Michael's. Advisor, she said aloud now, voice formal again, carefully neutral. Step forward. Every survival instinct he had screamed that this was a terrible idea. Every protocol he'd memorized insisted he obey. He stepped forward. As he moved, memories he had buried under years of false names and forged histories began to stir. A different uniform, a different mission, a moment recorded officially as his death, complete with wreckage, sealed files, and a condolence notice that had probably been printed on very expensive paper. He had been dead, properly dead, with witnesses, and yet here he was, alive enough to feel the weight of a queen's gaze and the sudden, terrifying realization that someone had seen through everything. Thera's voice dropped again, too low for the translators to bother with. I watched you die, she said. Michael managed a thin smile, the kind he reserved for bomb disposal and awkward reunions. With respect, Your Majesty, he said softly, people have been wrong about that before. One of her ears twitched, just slightly. For the first time since he had entered the chamber, the walls shifted color again, this time to a muted gold, the hue of a secret too large to stay buried, and a truth that had finally noticed it was late. Michael had the distinct feeling that his carefully reconstructed life had just developed a very serious crack. Michael discovered that there were exactly 3 kinds of silence in the universe. The first was the comfortable kind, like the hum of a ship at cruising speed, where nothing was wrong and everyone trusted the machinery not to explode. The second was the dangerous kind, the one that arrived right before alarms, impacts, or dramatic last words. The third kind was this. It followed him out of the council chamber like a loyal but judgmental pet. 2 honor guards escorted him through corridors grown from the same living crystal as the chamber walls. The corridors reacted to movement, brightening where he stepped and dimming behind him, as if politely pretending he wasn't there once he passed. No one spoke. Michael tried to look calm. He failed internally and compensated externally by walking with the relaxed confidence of a man who was absolutely not replaying the last 10 minutes of his life on a loop. She watched you die, his implant whispered helpfully. Yes, thank you, Michael muttered under his breath. I was there. Statistically improbable, the implant continued, emotionally inconvenient. That's my brand. The guard stopped in front of a private chamber sealed by a translucent barrier that shimmered with faint mathematical patterns. One of them gestured for Michael to enter. The barrier parted like a polite thought changing its mind. Inside, the room was smaller, quieter, and significantly less full of people who could arrest him. A panoramic window revealed a star field so dense it looked almost artificial, as if someone had overdone it with the stars to make a point. Somewhere far below, the alien capital city spiraled outward in elegant, gravity-defying arcs. Queen Thera stood with her back to him. Up close, the resemblance to a human woman was even more unsettling. Same posture, same subtle tension in the shoulders that suggested long responsibility and little sleep. Only the ears betrayed her, long, expressive, angled slightly back as if she were listening not to the room, but to memory itself. Michael cleared his throat. I assume, he said carefully, that this is the part where I'm either executed quietly or asked extremely uncomfortable questions. Thera did not turn around. You always spoke like that, she said. The word always landed harder than any accusation. Michael winced. I want to be very clear, he replied. I have no idea who you think I am. She turned slowly. The look on her face was not anger. Not yet. It was worse. It was the look of someone standing at the edge of a truth they had mourned into a shape that could no longer be reshaped easily. You used to say humor was a form of armor, she said. You said it distracted enemies and frightened allies. Michael opened his mouth, closed it again. That does sound like something I would say, he admitted. Hypothetically. Her ears shifted forward, attentive now, focused. Michael, she said, tasting the name, that is what you call yourself now. It was on sale, he said weakly. Came with a free identity and a lifetime supply of bad decisions. For a brief, dangerous moment, something flickered across her expression. Almost a smile. It vanished quickly, as if embarrassed to have existed. You died on Kelt 9, she said. Your ship entered the atmosphere too fast. The telemetry ended in fire. I watched the data feed myself. Michael leaned against a nearby console because his legs had decided this conversation required structural support. Yes, he said. That's the official version. Very dramatic. Explosions, heroic angles. I'm told the soundtrack was excellent. She stared at him. He sighed. I didn't die, he said more softly. I was reassigned. Classified mission, new face, new name, new dental records. Trust me, the dental part alone was traumatizing. Her eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in pain. They erased you, she said. Very thoroughly, he agreed. I don't even get holiday cards. The room fell quiet again, but this silence was different. It was heavy with years. Years she had spent believing someone was gone. Years he had spent believing no one remembered. You never contacted me, Thera said. Michael shrugged helplessly. I wasn't allowed to remember you. That stopped her. What? They don't just change your name, he said. They adjust memories, lock some away, blur others. It's like putting your past in a box and labeling it, "Do not open unless you want to ruin everything." He tapped his temple. Some things leak through. Feelings, habits, bad jokes. One of her ears twitched at that. She turned away again, facing the stars. I mourned you, she said quietly. I held ceremonies. I stood where we used to argue and pretended not to wait for your voice. Michael swallowed. I'm sorry, he said. For what it's worth, being alive wasn't as satisfying as advertised. That earned him a sharp look. I became queen 2 years after your death, she said. I thought it was because I was ready. Now I wonder if I was just tired of losing. Michael considered that. For what it's worth, he said, you seem to be doing a good job. The walls haven't tried to eat me yet. They do that sometimes, she said dryly. There it was again, that almost smile. It hung between them, fragile and dangerous, like a bridge rebuilt from memory alone. Outside, the stars continued their ancient, indifferent dance. Inside, 2 lives that had been severed by bureaucracy and classified lies stood uncomfortably close, neither quite sure whether the past had returned or whether it had simply refused to stay dead. Michael was escorted back to his assigned quarters with the kind of politeness that suggested several people were debating whether he was a diplomatic asset or an extremely elaborate mistake. The corridor lights adjusted to his pace, glowing a little brighter when he slowed, as if encouraging him to keep moving and not think too hard about recent revelations involving death, resurrection, and alien royalty. His room was comfortable in the unsettling way only advanced civilizations manage. The bed subtly reshaped itself when he sat down. The walls displayed a soothing approximation of a sunrise from a planet he had never visited, and the air smelled faintly of something engineered to reduce anxiety. It was failing. Michael exhaled and let himself fall backward onto the bed. Well, he said to the ceiling, that went aggressively poorly. Correction, his implant replied. It went statistically fascinating. That's not comforting. It was not intended to be. Michael stared up at the artificial sky. His head felt crowded, like someone had unlocked a door he had spent years leaning against. Images flickered at the edges of his thoughts. Another face reflected in a viewport, a voice calling his name in a tone that carried authority and warmth, an argument that ended in laughter instead of resolution. He rubbed his eyes. She recognized me, he said quietly. Not the name. Me. Facial reconstruction probability error margin. Negligible, the implant said. Voice pattern similarity, 99.8%. Behavioral echoes, persistent. You never stop being yourself. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, but it explains why someone else remembered. Michael sat up. That bothered him more than anything else. The human program that had erased his past had been ruthless. Friends, records, even emotional associations had been locked away behind neurological firewalls. He was not supposed to be recognizable. He was not supposed to exist in anyone's memory in a meaningful way. And yet Queen Thera had looked at him like a wound that had learned to walk. There has to be more to it, he muttered. Agreed, the implant said. Her species possesses sensory capabilities beyond standard human perception. Long ears are not merely aesthetic, Michael snorted. I had noticed. He stood and paced the room, hands clasped behind his back out of habit. She said she watched the telemetry herself. That means she was close, closer than anyone ever admitted. Cross-referencing archived mission data, the implant said. Access denied, again. Of course it is. Michael stopped pacing and leaned against the wall. If she knows who I am, he said slowly, others might too, or they will soon. Political instability likelihood increasing. And if the humans find out she knows, Michael added, they'll panic. Humans do that, the implant agreed. There was a soft chime at the door. Michael stiffened. Yes? He called. The door shimmered open to reveal a small, hovering device that looked like a polite mistake. It projected a faint halo of light and carried itself with the cautious confidence of something designed to deliver bad news gently. Advisor Michael, it said in a pleasant, neutral tone, Her Majesty requests your presence in the archive hall. Michael closed his eyes. Of course she does. The archive hall was older than the palace surrounding it, a structure preserved rather than renovated. The walls were darker here, etched with patterns that did not shift or glow, but remained stubbornly fixed, as if history itself had insisted on permanence. Thera stood near the center, her long ears angled outward, alert. Several translucent columns surrounded her, each filled with slowly rotating strands of light. Data stored in formats so ancient they bordered on ritual. You keep secrets very well, she said without turning, but not from everything. Michael approached cautiously. If this is where you tell me my existence violates 3 ancient prophecies, I'd like to sit down first. She glanced at him. Only one prophecy, she said, and it was vague. He relaxed a fraction. Good. Vague prophecies are manageable. She gestured toward one of the columns. The light within it shifted, forming a familiar image. His ship, years ago, descending toward Kelt 9. The angle was wrong, too detailed, too close. I was not merely watching telemetry, she said. I was listening. To what? To you, Michael frowned. That doesn't make sense. My people developed resonance archives long before faster-than-light travel, she said. They record not just data, but intent. Emotional signatures, identity imprints. She turned to face him fully now. When your ship burned, the archive did not register an ending. It registered an interruption. Michael stared at the projection. The moment he remembered dying, alarms screaming, gravity tearing at him, the sudden, impossible silence, flickered in his chest like an echo. So you knew, he said quietly, all this time. I knew something was wrong, she corrected. I knew the resonance was unfinished, like a sentence without punctuation. Michael let out a breath that was half laugh, half disbelief. Humans usually just leave things unresolved emotionally, he said. We don't build technology around it. She studied him. You always tried to make light of heavy things. It's either that or cry, he said, and I don't look good crying. One of her ears twitched sharply, amusement betraying her composure for just a second. Your resonance never faded, she said. Even after years. When you stood in the council chamber, it was unmistakable. So my secret identity was defeated by vibes, Michael said. In essence, she replied. He shook his head. I get taken out by alien vibes. That's how I go. You are not gone, she said firmly. The words settled between them, heavier than any accusation. Then what am I? He asked. Thera deactivated the archive column. Darkness reclaimed the space where the past had hovered. You are a variable, she said, one that both our peoples believed was resolved. She stepped closer, her voice lowering, and variables change outcomes. Michael met her gaze. Beneath the weight of history and power, he saw something achingly familiar, someone who had waited, hoped, and never truly let go. Well, he said, managing a crooked smile, I've always been good at messing up projections. For the first time since his return from the dead, Queen Thera allowed herself a real smile. It was small, brief, dangerous, and it made the future feel far less certain than the past ever had. The room Queen Thera chose for their next conversation was not part of the palace proper. Michael could tell because the walls did not glow helpfully, the floor did not adjust to his posture, and nothing smelled like engineered calm. Instead, the chamber was carved directly into the station's inner hull, raw alloy ribs exposed like the bones of a very large, very expensive creature. Outside the wide viewport, a red dwarf star pulsed slowly, its light uneven and persistent, like a heartbeat that had learned patience. "This place predates my reign," Thera said, standing near the window. "Before titles, before councils, before people learned how to lie politely." Michael looked around. "It has a very honest atmosphere," he said, "like a room that would tell you your haircut was a mistake. That is why I brought you here." He took that in stride. "I respect a room with integrity." She did not smile, but one ear angled toward him in a way he was beginning to recognize as restrained amusement. He was collecting those moments carefully, like contraband. They stood in silence for a while. Not the first silence, the comfortable kind, but something closer to it. The star outside flared and dimmed, indifferent to personal revelations and political fallout. Thera broke it first. "You were different before," she said. "Louder, less careful." Michael nodded. "That tracks. I used to believe if something went wrong, I could talk my way out of it. And now? Now I believe if something goes wrong," he said, "it's probably because I talked." She turned to face him. "You learned caution. I learned consequences." Her gaze softened, just slightly. "I did not." "That's hard to believe," he said, gesturing vaguely at her crownless but unmistakably royal presence. "I learned responsibility," she corrected, "not caution. Responsibility requires you to act even when you know the cost." Michael considered that. "Caution is mostly about avoiding embarrassment," he said. "Responsibility is about choosing which embarrassment is worth it." That earned him a look, sharp, assessing, approving, despite itself. "You were always very good at turning philosophy into excuses," she said. "I prefer to think of it as accessibility." She moved closer to the viewport, resting one hand against the alloy frame. Her long ears tilted backward, not in anger, but in reflection. "When you disappeared," she said, "I believed I had failed to protect you." Michael frowned. "You didn't send me on that mission." "No," she said, "but I argued against it. I told them your presence mattered more here than anywhere else." He winced. "I'm sorry." She looked at him then, truly looked, and the word sorry seemed far too small for what had been missing between them for years. "They told me your death was necessary," she continued, "that it prevented a larger conflict, that the future required it." Michael exhaled. "The future is very demanding that way." "And now?" she asked. "What does the future require now that you are inconveniently alive?" "That's the big question," he said. "If I had a good answer, I'd be selling it." She studied his face as if comparing it to a memory she carried not in images, but in resonance. "You are not the same," she said, "but you are not someone else either." "That's been my problem," Michael replied. "I keep getting introduced to myself." He hesitated, then added, "Do you hate me?" The question hung there, raw and unarmored. Thera did not answer immediately. She turned back to the star, watching its uneven light wash across the chamber. "No," she said at last. "I tried. It did not work." Michael let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Good," he said. "I'm terrible at being hated. I get sarcastic." "You get worse." "I get much worse." Her lips curved, just slightly. "I remember." They stood closer now, not touching, but near enough that Michael could sense the faint hum of the station through the floor. The subtle electromagnetic whisper that his implant translated into nothing useful but comforting. "There are those on the council," Thera said, "who believe your presence is a threat." "That's fair," Michael said. "I am very disruptive to carefully curated narratives." "And there are those," she continued, "who believe your survival is symbolic." "Also fair," he said. "I've been told I have that effect." She turned to him again. "What do you believe?" Michael thought about the mission that had erased him, about the quiet years of being someone else, about standing in a council chamber and being seen through everything. "I believe," he said slowly, That whatever I was supposed to be, I didn't finish being it. Her ears lifted, attentive. I believe, he went on, that someone decided my story was complete when it wasn't. And now that it's back on the table, everyone's nervous. Thera nodded once. Unfinished things are dangerous. They're also interesting. A faint, genuine smile appeared this time. It stayed. Michael, she said, using the name deliberately, if the truth of who you are becomes public, it will destabilize alliances. I'm very good at destabilizing things, he said. Ask my previous supervisors. And if you remain hidden, she added, it will require continued lies. He grimaced. I'm tired of lies. So am I, she said quietly. They stood there, the weight of two empires pressing in from opposite directions, and somewhere between them, the fragile space where something unfinished might finally be allowed to continue. Outside, the red dwarf flared again, stubborn and alive, refusing to burn out on schedule. Michael glanced at it, then back at her. For what it's worth, he said, if this ends with me causing an interstellar incident, I promise to apologize sincerely. She laughed. It was soft, brief, and real. That, she said, is exactly why I am afraid of what comes next. And exactly why, Michael replied, it might be worth it. By the next rotation cycle, everyone knew something was wrong. They didn't know what exactly. Diplomatic species were very good at sensing instability long before identifying its cause. Corridors filled a little faster. Conversations ended a little quicker when Michael entered a room. Data projections lingered a fraction of a second too long on his name before resolving into something less incriminating. Michael noticed all of it. He was sitting in a secondary observation lounge, pretending to review trade statistics, while actually counting how many times the ambient lighting shifted from calm white to cautious amber. He was on shift number 11 when it happened. Advisor Michael, said a voice behind him, you are requested in Subcouncil 3. He didn't turn around immediately. Requested, he repeated. That's the polite word, right? Not the we've already decided word? The aide hesitated. That was answer enough. Michael stood, straightened his jacket, and sighed. All right, he said. Let's go disappoint some powerful people. Subcouncil 3 was smaller than the main chamber and significantly less patient. Where the Grand Council favored ceremony and layered language, this room specialized in efficiency and sharp edges. Representatives sat in a semicircle, their forms varied enough to make human furniture design cry quietly in a corner. Thera was not present. That was deliberate. Michael took his place at the center, acutely aware that every eye, compound, luminescent, reflective, or unsettlingly familiar, was on him. Advisor Michael, began an elder with a voice like compressed stone, your identity has come under review. Michael smiled. That happens more often than you'd think. A ripple of irritation passed through the room. You were declared deceased, another counselor said, her long ears marking her as one of Thera's people, though her posture was rigid with formality. Yet you stand here. I'm very committed, Michael replied. It felt rude not to show up. This is not humor, the elder snapped. That's unfortunate, Michael said. It's all I brought. He felt his implant humming softly, feeding him micro-expressions, probability curves, emotional spikes. The room was divided, not evenly, but enough to be dangerous. You represent a contradiction, the elder continued. Your survival undermines trust between our allied systems and your own government. Michael nodded. Yes, I've been told I'm bad for clean narratives. Your continued presence creates risk, another voice said. Political, strategic, symbolic. Symbolic is my favorite, Michael said. It sounds less like an arrest. That earned him a few startled reactions. Humor was still a strange currency here, valuable, but unpredictable. Let us speak plainly, the elder said. Did you knowingly conceal your identity from this council? Michael considered lying. He was very good at it. He was also very tired. Yes, he said, because I was ordered to, and because if I hadn't, I wouldn't be standing here. I'd be a footnote with better lighting. A murmur spread. And now, the elder pressed, now that the truth is inconveniently present? Michael met their gaze. Now I'm trying to figure out whether being alive is still considered a violation. Silence followed. Not the heavy kind, the calculating kind. You are dismissed, the elder said finally. For now. Michael left before anyone could change their mind. The corridors felt narrower on the way back, though he knew they hadn't changed. He exhaled only when he reached the lift platform that carried him toward the private levels. Thera was waiting when he arrived, not in a throne room or a council chamber, but in a quiet garden grown into the station's inner ring. Bioluminescent plants pulsed gently, responding to movement and proximity. The air was warm, fragrant with something that reminded Michael of rain he'd never personally experienced. She looked tense. Well, Michael said carefully, if this is where you tell me I've been officially reclassified as a problem, I'd like to request a softer chair. She turned to him, her long ears angled sharply backward. They questioned you without me, she said. Yes, he replied. I assume that was meant to reduce bias. Her eyes flashed. It reduced nothing. He shrugged. I didn't die this time. I'm calling it a win. She studied him for a long moment, then said, some believe you should be removed. Michael blinked. Removed as in relocated, or removed as in very removed? Her mouth tightened. Relocated. Officially. Quietly. Ah, he said. The classic solution. I will not allow it, she said. Michael tilted his head. That sounds expensive. It will be, she agreed. Politically. He looked at her, really looked, and felt something shift in his chest. You don't owe me that. She stepped closer. I owe myself the truth, she said. And so do you. He laughed softly. You're very persuasive for someone who's not threatening me. That comes later. There it was again, that dangerous almost smile. They are afraid, she continued, not of you as a man, of you as a symbol, of the idea that death is not as final as they prefer. Michael glanced at the glowing plants. I get that, he said. Data projections lingered a fraction of a second too long on his name before resolving into something less incriminating. Michael noticed all of it. He was sitting in a secondary observation lounge, pretending to review trade statistics while actually counting how many times the ambient lighting shifted from calm white to cautious amber. He was on shift number 11 when it happened. Advisor Michael, said a voice behind him, you are requested in Subcouncil 3. He didn't turn around immediately. Requested, he repeated. That's the polite word, right? Not the we've already decided word. The aide hesitated. That was answer enough. Michael stood, straightened his jacket and sighed. All right, he said. Let's go disappoint some powerful people. Subcouncil 3 was smaller than the main chamber and significantly less patient. Where the Grand Council favored ceremony and layered language, this room specialized in efficiency and sharp edges. Representatives sat in a semicircle. Their forms varied enough to make human furniture design cry quietly in a corner. Thera was not present. That was deliberate. Michael took his place at the center, acutely aware that every eye, compound, luminescent, reflective, or unsettlingly familiar, was on him. Advisor Michael, began an elder with a voice like compressed stone, your identity has come under review. Michael smiled. That happens more often than you'd think. A ripple of irritation passed through the room. You were declared deceased, another counselor said, her long ears marking her as one of Thera's people, though her posture was rigid with formality. Yet you stand here. I'm very committed, Michael replied. It felt rude not to show up. This is not humor, the elder snapped. That's unfortunate, Mom, Michael said. It's all I brought. He felt his implant humming softly, feeding him micro-expressions, probability curves, emotional spikes. The room was divided, not evenly, but enough to be dangerous. You represent a contradiction, the elder continued. Your survival undermines trust between our allied systems and your own government. Michael nodded. Yes, I've been told I'm bad for clean narratives. Your continued presence creates risk, another voice said. Political, strategic, symbolic. Symbolic is my favorite, Michael said. It sounds less like an arrest. That earned him a few startled reactions. Humor was still a strange currency here. Valuable, but unpredictable. "Let us speak plainly," the elder said. "Did you knowingly conceal your identity from this council?" Michael considered lying. He was very good at it. He was also very tired. "Yes," he said, "because I was ordered to, and because if I hadn't, I wouldn't be standing here. I'd be a footnote with better lighting." A murmur spread. "And now," the elder pressed, "now that the truth is inconveniently present?" Michael met their gaze. "Now I'm trying to figure out whether being alive is still considered a violation." Silence followed. Not the heavy kind, the calculating kind. "You are dismissed," the elder said finally. "For now." Michael left before anyone could change their mind. The corridors felt narrower on the way back, though he knew they hadn't changed. He exhaled only when he reached the lift platform that carried him toward the private levels. Thera was waiting when he arrived. Not in a throne room or a council chamber, but in a quiet garden grown into the station's inner ring. Bioluminescent plants pulsed gently, responding to movement and proximity. The air was warm, fragrant with something that reminded Michael of rain he'd never personally experienced. She looked tense. "Well," Michael said carefully, "if this is where you tell me I've been officially reclassified as a problem, I'd like to request a softer chair." She turned to him, her long ears angled sharply backward. "They questioned you without me," she said. "Yes," he replied. "I assume that was meant to reduce bias." Her eyes flashed. "It reduced nothing." He shrugged. "I didn't die this time. I'm calling it a win." She studied him for a long moment, then said, "Some believe you should be removed." Michael blinked. "Removed as in relocated? Or removed as in very removed?" Her mouth tightened. "Relocated. Officially. Quietly." "Ah," he said. "The classic solution." "I will not allow it," she said. Michael tilted his head. "That sounds expensive." "It will be," she agreed. "Politically." He looked at her, really looked, and felt something shift in his chest. "You don't owe me that." She stepped closer. "I owe myself the truth," she said. "And so do you." He laughed softly. "You're very persuasive for someone who's not threatening me. That comes later." There it was again, that dangerous almost smile. "They are afraid," she continued, "not of you as a man, of you as a symbol, of the idea that death is not as final as they prefer." Michael glanced at the glowing plants. "I get that," he said, "but neither are they." He stepped closer to the display, studying the probe's pattern. "They're using resonance tech similar to yours. Older, cruder, but aggressive." Her ears angled back in recognition. "They have stolen what was never meant to be shared." "Story of the universe," Michael said. The strategist hesitated. "If they complete the scan, they can isolate Advisor Michael's signature." Michael raised a hand. "Small correction. They can isolate a signature. It doesn't have to be mine." Thera turned. "What are you suggesting?" He smiled, the familiar crooked one that always preceded bad ideas and occasional miracles. "I suggest we confuse them." Minutes later, the command ring buzzed with activity. Engineers rerouted systems, feeding controlled noise into the resonance field. Michael stood at the center of it, implant wide open, memories brushing dangerously close to the surface. "This is inadvisable," the implant warned. "I know," Michael said. "That's why it's exciting." Thera stood opposite him, hands steady, eyes locked on his. "You do not have to do this." "I kind of do," he replied. "They won't stop until I'm either gone or boring. And I refuse to be boring." He reached out, letting his resonance echo outward, fragmented, multiplied, tangled with false signatures and half-finished identities. The station shuddered as if clearing its throat. Outside, the probe faltered. "They're confused," the strategist said. "Multiple variables. None stable." Michael exhaled slowly. Sweat beaded at his temples. "Good. Confused enemies make mistakes." The projection flared, then collapsed. Cheers rippled through the command ring, restrained but real. Thera stepped forward as Michael swayed slightly. She caught his arm, steadying him. "You risk yourself," she said quietly. He looked at her, tired but amused. "You said unfinished things don't stay quiet." Her grip tightened. "And you chose to become louder." He smiled. I've always hated being ignored. Alarms faded. System stabilized. The station breathed again. But beyond its hull, something withdrew. Not defeated, merely delayed. Thera looked toward the stars. They will return. Michael followed her gaze. Yeah, he said. But now they know I bite back. She met his eyes, something fierce and relieved, and dangerously hopeful flickering there. For the first time, the crisis had not ended with him running or disappearing. It had ended with him choosing to stand, and that, he suspected, would change everything. The station felt different after the crisis passed. Not quieter, if anything, the systems hummed with renewed purpose, but steadier, like a structure that had tested its own limits and decided it could hold. The lighting returned to its usual confident glow. Corridors relaxed their defensive posture, and conversations resumed with the careful optimism of people who knew they had narrowly avoided something very unpleasant and were determined not to think too hard about it. Michael noticed all of this while standing in the same observation lounge where he had once pretended to read trade statistics. This time, he wasn't pretending, mostly because no one expected him to anymore. The truth had not exploded across the alliance the way everyone had feared. Instead, it had arrived slowly, deliberately, framed as a revelation rather than a scandal. A man declared dead had survived. A mission had failed to erase what mattered. The narrative adjusted, groaned, and then, astonishingly, adapted. Michael had helped with that, not by speeches or declarations, but by refusing to vanish again. He sipped his tea, still terrible, and grimaced. One day, he muttered, advanced civilizations will discover flavor. Unlikely, Thera said from behind him. Suffering builds character. He turned, smiling. I have enough character. She joined him by the viewport. Her long ears relaxed now, angled in a way that suggested she was listening to the present rather than the past. She looked lighter, not unburdened. Queens never were, but no longer carrying something unfinished alone. The council has finalized its decision, she said. Michael raised an eyebrow. That sounds ominous. They have acknowledged your survival, she continued. Publicly, your former government has followed suit. And, she said, allowing herself a small, satisfied smile, no one is allowed to pretend you are dead ever again. Michael considered that. I suppose that's progress. They have also agreed, she added, that your identity is your own. He blinked. That's unusually generous. They are afraid of what happens if they are not, she said frankly. He laughed. That's my favorite reason to be respected. They stood in companionable silence, watching ships glide along distant lanes of light. Somewhere out there, the third party that had tried to claim him was recalculating. The threat had not vanished, but it had been contained, named, and understood. Unfinished things, it turned out, were hardest to exploit once they chose their own endings. I've been offered a position, Michael said casually. Thera glanced at him. Several. Yes, he admitted. Apparently surviving death makes you very employable. And I declined most of them, he said. I kept the one that lets me stay here. Her ears lifted slightly. As what? He shrugged. Advisor, liaison, walking reminder that erasing people doesn't work. She studied him. You have changed. He smiled softly. I stopped running. She nodded. So did I. They turned toward each other then, the space between them no longer crowded with ghosts or half-spoken grief. What remained was quieter, steadier, built on recognition rather than longing. Do you remember, Thera said, the last argument we had before you left? Michael thought about it. The memory surfaced without resistance now. You accused me of believing I was expendable. And you said? I said that if something went wrong, at least it wouldn't be you, he replied, which in retrospect was a terrible argument. She smiled fully this time. It was. I don't believe that anymore, he said. Her gaze held his. Neither do I. The station chimed softly, an incoming message. Michael glanced at the display, then sighed. Please tell me that's not another crisis. She looked. It is a ceremonial invitation. He relaxed. Oh, good. Those only hurt emotionally. They walked together toward the exit, unhurried. In the corridors, people nodded to him, not with suspicion now, but with something closer to respect. He returned it easily, no longer feeling like a man wearing someone else's life. At the threshold of the council chamber, Thera paused. "When I asked if you were still alive," she said quietly, "I did not expect an answer." Michael met her gaze. "I didn't either. And now?" He smiled, warm and certain. "Now I plan on staying that way." Her ears angled forward, attentive, present. "Good," she said. "The future has already adjusted its expectations." Together they stepped into the chamber, not as ruler and ghost, not as queen and memory, but as two people who had survived being unfinished and chosen, at last, to continue. Outside, the stars kept moving. So did they.